Glimpo was very pleased with himself. He had passed all the tests and had been selected for a delegation to meet with the first alien race that his kind had ever encountered. It had been generations since first contact, and discussions had been dragging out. Glimpo's greatest wish was to finally close the negotiations his forefathers had started. Entering the room where the meeting was to take place, he pressed the keypad by the door to announce his arrival.
Remember when we had to knock?
An older member of the delegation grumbled. First contact and the initial stages of discussions had been done planet-side. This was the first to be done on a human ship fitted to accommodate their race.
To think these slow beings took 8 blocks to alter a vessel, the old member continued to grumble.
All due respect, sir, their machinery may be more complex than ours. It was the case that the few pieces of technology that had been gifted had been reverse-engineered. They weren't any marvels of function, but they were beyond complex by their race's standards from the reports Glimpo had read. Ah, welcome, delegates, a human said, standing up as the group entered the room. The delegates felt their breath freeze in their throats. They had only seen hollow images of the race identified as humans.
I see the halls were not to impress power upon visitors, the old member of the group whispered. Looking up at the human who stood a good twice their height, they had naturally assumed the race they were meeting was the same height as them, a failure the data team would no doubt be reprimanded for. I hope we can finish these negotiations today. It has been a little while since we started, and the people back home are eager to start trade.
Yes, the old member barked.
We would have finished these discussions blocks ago, had you not delayed so much.
I apologize for the delays. It took us a little while to retrofit parts of the ship to suit your people better.
I was but a newborn pup when you landed, and now I can finally see my race upon the greater stage of the universe.
Indeed. We have prepared all the documents you requested. With a flick of his finger on a data slate he was holding, the group felt a buzz from their devices. Appearing on the screen were all the agreed-upon provisions.
Finally!
It's good to be here. Glimpo grinned as he read over the document before spotting something. Apologies, human, but what are these numbers here? Numbers? The human repeated, arching a brow. Oh, those are the date. I thank you.
The date, the old delegate barked. The progression seems off. Do you measure time differently from us?
It never came up, but it is likely as we are from different worlds.
I see. I suppose that does make sense.
The old member marked the document with a digital stamp to indicate his agreement, as did the others in the group. Perfect. With that, we can now proceed with the celebration. Walking over to a wall, the human pressed a wall-mounted device, and machines immediately began bringing out plates with cuisine from their homeworld. As the other members of the delegation helped themselves to the food and drink, Glimpo couldn't help but gaze out the window. Looking down at the crimson orb that was his homeworld, a view afforded to so very few, but would soon become commonplace. Beautiful view, isn't it? The human diplomat said, walking up to stand beside Glimpo. Yes, it is amazing. I still remember when we first arrived here. It was a sight to behold, seeing all the cities light up the world at night. You mean your ancestors? Oh, no. I was part of the crew when we first surveyed this world. But that was close to 100 blocks ago. Glimpo's outburst had paused the celebrations as all his fellows now looked at him with shock for his outburst, something no diplomat worth his fur should do. I must apologize for my outburst. No need. One moment. The AI is still deciphering blocks. It seems to be a new word the auto-translator units we are using hasn't identified. The human looked at his data slate as the AI worked out the meaning. But to Glimpo, it was odd. A plock was a plock. Every newborn cub learnt its meaning by the end of their very first. Ah! The human exclaimed excitedly. I see the meaning now. Glimpo, was it? Glimpo nodded. A plock is what my race calls a month. Month! Glimpo echoed as he realized the humans had another word for their unit of time. So, your race arrived here some 100 months ago? The human nodded. Yes, we had to take things slowly so as to not cause chaos. We slowly contacted your governments and created vaccines so we wouldn't cause plagues. It is why we took so long. So, you must be old then? Glimpo asked, looking up at the human with awe. There were only stories and fairy tales of races living as long as the human was saying. Oh boy, I do feel old.
I turned 30 only last month.
30?
Glimpo tilted his head, letting his ears flop in confusion.
But you said you were amongst those who first found us.
Oh, I'm sorry, I meant years.
Years?
Glimpo heard a ping from his data slate, revealing it meant roughly 12 plocks. Glimpo felt his heart rate quicken as he did the maths.
So, you are 361 plocks?
The entire party of diplomats froze in shock, looking at the human, a being older than many of the nations they called home.
You mean this youngster is actually older than I am?
The old member of the group asked, trembling. It was a common point amongst their race that with age comes wisdom, and with wisdom comes the right to rule.
Well, I mean, when you put it like that, I guess so.
How old are you, Glimpo? You might be a few years old.
I would be roughly 2 of your human years.
2? So the eldest of your number is?
Roughly 7 by your years,
the old member declared.
Wow!
No wonder your race kept changing the diplomats we were talking with. We kept thinking we were doing something wrong. I will need to have a word with our data team about this one. But to think your race ages at this rate? Though it would explain your broadcast.
Broadcast?
Yes, the first thing we detected about your world was broadcast. We thought it was a translation error, a malfunction, or even interference that made it run at a faster rate, but to think you live your lives faster than imaginable.
Human, are you an old member of your race?
Glimpo asked, hoping the human was just a very old member.
Me?
Oh no, I still have my grandparents. Grandma, though, is more machine than Nan these days, but she celebrated her 90th.
Over 1,000 plocks? So many generations with one being.
The human began before pausing, feeling the awkward atmosphere descending. Guess we are your equivalent of elves, then.
Elves?
Glimpo repeated, hoping for a reprieve. Yeah, back on our world we have a story about a race of beings called elves. They look just like us, but had pointed ears and lived millennia. The data slates all pinged, and the delegates all paled, seeing the word meant 1,000 iterations of a year. But you don't need to worry. They are all just fairy tales and stories.
All due respect, human. A being living as long as you do to us would be from the stories and myths for us. How confident are you that they aren't out there?
Well, bugger. Guess we need to look into the possibility of space elves. Just hope they aren't the Warhammer kind.